Hey guys, welcome to a new video. I'm Stephanie West. I'm an LPC here in the state of Michigan. Today I want to invite you into an activity that's a sentence completion exercise that can actually tell us a lot about ourselves, and it can also invite us into new communication strategies, and it can also help protect relationships because once we understand what's running for us, we can hopefully communicate that to other people and they can help kind of assuage some of our fears or work with us on kind of better bracketing some of the big emotions that come up. So up on the board here, I have a sentence starter, and there's going to be a whole host of ways you can complete the sentence. And I've picked a couple of them to kind of guide you through this activity. But up on the board here, it says, when I feel blank, I might overreact or overrespond. And so I'll work with clients. They'll come in and say, X, Y, and Z happened this last week and I had a big reaction. And we'll say, well, what do you think that was about? Often they'll say, well, so-and-so frustrated me, or X, Y, and Z happened, or this particular event unfolded and I did not like it. And so we'll talk about, okay, but why did you not like it? Why did it unfold in a way that led to distress? Why did things go sideways for you? And usually there's core fears. So we don't just look at the situation, we look at the fear behind the situation. So let's go back up to the board here. And some of the common fears that run for people is, when I feel helpless, I overreact. When I feel excluded, so I feel unseen, I feel unheard, I feel unimportant, I'm going to overreact or overrespond. When I feel like I'm a burden, so there's a level of vulnerability, I feel any type of sensitivity to what if I'm imposing on someone, well then I overreact or overrespond because we don't like being helpless, we don't like being vulnerable, we don't like having exclusions happen. So the way it runs with clients is we will try to pin down what are some of the things that are big triggers for us. And so last week I was talking with a client and I said, do you notice that when a perception of injustice shows up in your story, you almost immediately experience a feeling of helplessness? Because way back when she was much younger, there were some significant injustices that happened in her life, and she was far less resourced than she is now. She was, in essence, pretty helpless, and no one walked with her through some tough stuff. So when an injustice shows up, a very young part of herself comes forward and just rails against injustices and also experiences helplessness. And so one of the reasons we want to name these pervasive feelings of, despondency and distress is once we can name them, perhaps we can actually refute them a little bit. So when I feel helpless, I overreact. As soon as I can pinpoint that that's a catalyst for me, I can start to ask myself questions. So let's say I'm experiencing a sense of overwhelm and I can say, Steph, wait a second, are you feeling helpless right now? Yup, that's a place where you traditionally overreact. Okay, are you actually helpless right now? And then I come into kind of my 35-year-old brain and say, well, wait a second, I'm not that younger person anymore that actually was helpless. I could do A, B, C, and D. Those are resources that I have available to me, so maybe I'm not helpless. So once I've identified the big feeling and then I've dismantled it by speaking truth to it, well, suddenly there's no reason to overrespond, or there's a significantly less reason to overrespond. I think I said that incorrectly. But I don't have as big of a reaction because I notice that I don't like feeling helpless. Then I notice I'm not actually helpless, and it gives me some space to move. One of the things I talked about a couple weeks ago is the idea of hyper independence, where I'm like, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want anyone to be inconvenienced by me. What if the very thing I do is when a need shows up where I feel like I might be a burden, I have that fear, I say a second, wait, is that true? Am I actually a burden? Or am I a human being that needs some extra support right now, some extra help? Maybe that's what being human's about. So the big emotional response of being a burden, it starts to go down, it starts to assuage because I'm speaking truth into it. We don't get to speak truth into it until we disrupt the automatic process that's running that says, don't be a burden, don't be a burden, don't be a burden, don't be helpless, don't be helpless, don't be helpless. Those are things that once we identify them, we can speak truth into them and begin to dismantle them. For the second one here, where someone feels excluded, a lot of times that's actually a cognitive distortion that's running. And so I want to share a specific anecdote. I had to have been about 15 or 16 months ago. I was talking to a friend and I said something to the effect of, I'm off on an island right now and I'm so alone and it's awful. And he said to me, Steph, that's not true. He said, this person's there for you, this person's there for you, this person's there for you, and this person's there for you. And I know for a fact that you're actually surrounded really well right now. Now, your cognitive distortion is painting a picture of no one's around and you're being excluded and you're incredibly lonely. But we can look for some exceptions there, because that's not actually accurate. That's not the complete picture. But we can't call into mind the exceptions. We can't sit there and push back against it with truth until we pin down precisely what the big fear is that's running. So fear that I'm helpless, fear that I'm vulnerable, fear that I'm being excluded, whatever it is, we can do something with it once we identify what it is. And then I can talk to my friends and say, hey, I realized my big response was because I felt excluded. You weren't excluding me. That was something that I was dealing with. So I apologize for my over response. That's where the relationship protection comes in. That's where the skill building comes in. You work specifically on what we say is name it to tame it. You work specifically on bringing it into your awareness, noticing where some of the faulty thinking might be going on, and then speaking truthfully about it. That's how we dismantle some of these fears that run. And then you come see a really, cool therapist, and we can work on those things together if you want to.